would like to ask the Treasury Minister how much Manx Radio has invested in radio visualisation camera technology, the anticipated staffing and operating costs, and how it plans to develop this in future.
Following the Treasury Minister.
Mr. President, the 2016-2017 Manx Radio annual report laid before Tynwald in October provided a detailed overview of the station's plans for introducing radio visualisation, subsequently renamed Manx Radio Vision, which members can refer to for further details. Manx Radio Vision was soft-launched on Tuesday the 7th of November, and Manx Radio have reported to me that in the 7 days to Tuesday the 14th of November, 22,370 views of the video content had been recorded. I have been informed by the Chief Executive of Manx Radio that their investment in vision camera technology is £2,830 per annum for 7 years. The investment has been kept low because Manx Radio Vision primarily utilises the studio software and hardware that has been a central part of its studios for a number of years. There are no anticipated staffing or operating costs as the system is fully automated. Manx Radio informs me that they will continue to monitor public uptake for its imaginative news service and, if as expected there is significant audience use, will look in time to roll out the service across its studios and utilise the facility during outside broadcast coverage.
Supplementary, Mrs. Caine.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Treasury Minister for his answer. Is he aware that in the Manx Radio annual report it states that there is a business partner, business sponsor for the Radio Vision, but on air I heard in an interview with John Moss, Manx Telecom, say although they were the business partner, they were not paying for the system. Also, when Manx Radio receives a subvention from government of £875,000, and it makes a loss of £82,000 on its year, goes off and spends more money buying equipment to expand the service. Does anyone in Treasury approve such spending? And does the Treasury Minister feel that this represents value for money in terms of Manx Radio?
Treasury Minister.
Well, I think, Mr. President, many of these questions actually come down to whether or not Tynwald requires Manx Radio to deliver public service broadcasting. In fact, I must remind honourable members that in March 2014, Tynwald agreed at that time the subvention of Manx Radio to the tune of £850,000 per annum during the debate of the Select Committee report on public service broadcasting. It's clear to me, Mr. President, that there remain a number of questions about value for money being received from a public service broadcaster and the size and scale of the subvention, given the many challenges facing government finances. It is my expectation that once again this subject will be brought to this honourable court for confirmation and discussion as to whether or not the members of this honourable court wish to carry on providing subvention to Manx Radio and on what basis.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. As the shareholder of Manx Radio, can I ask what input the Treasury has into business cases or the strategic vision of the organisation? And secondly, given the overspend highlighted by the Honourable Member for Garff, what the implications are in terms of the overspend and how the organisation will be held accountable for that?
Reply, sir.
Well, basically, Mr. President, as the Honourable Member well knows, having been the Minister for Home Affairs, that Manx Radio has its own board of directors, and that the board of directors are responsible for delivering a public service broadcasting programme that is currently set out in an agreement and monitored by the Communications Commission. So in terms of direct input into what is happening with Manx Radio, that board of directors is ultimately responsible for ultimately delivering that programme and ensuring that we receive value for money. Clearly there are some items, including capital expenditure, that do come to the Treasury, but ultimately those items, of course, come before Tynwald. And it is, of course, Tynwald who will ultimately decide what money and what funding the radio station receives. And that is why, Mr. President, it is almost certain that within the next couple of months we will indeed debate the radio, debate the subvention that's being received, and of course honourable members will have the opportunity to propose any changes that they wish to the current system in order to ensure that the public is receiving what they regard as fair value for money.
Honourable Member for Douglas East, Ms. Bettison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the Treasury Minister sees the provision of video footage as being actually key to the public service broadcast obligation that Manx Radio hold.
Treasury Minister.
Mr. President, I'm not about to sort of start expressing my personal interpretation of whether or not the radio station are delivering its actual commitments in respect of public service broadcasting. That, and I would suggest, is a matter for the communications. And I keep repeating myself, Mr. President, this matter will be in front of honourable members in the next couple of months, and they can express whether or not they believe that radio visualisation, as it has been termed, is an appropriate for the radio station. And if they wish to exert that level of control, then they are perfectly entitled to do so, on the basis that we continue to require Manx Radio to be a public service broadcaster and to meet its requirements as outlined in the relevant agreement and legislation.
Speaker.
Thank you. Well, the Treasury Minister will know that we don't like to wait in Tynwald, we like to know now. But you seem to forget to answer both parts of the question that I put to him earlier. And firstly, that was, as the shareholder of Manx Radio, Treasury is the shareholder, what input does it have into its business cases and its strategic vision going forward? And secondly, as other departments in here would have to come back for a supplementary vote for an overspend, I ask what the accountability mechanism is for Manx Radio and when they overspend.
Thank you, Minister.
Well, Mr. President, what I can tell the honourable member is that I am currently engaging with the chairman of the directors and the board at Manx Radio to understand what exactly the radio station intends to deliver in the future in terms of meeting its requirements, and also bringing forward any proposals where it will find itself staying within the current subvention limits, but more importantly, whether it has any proposals to be able to deliver its services with less subvention. Once I've got that detail through, I'll be in a better position then to bring forward to this honourable court what sort of proposals Manx Radio may or may not have in the circumstances, or whether in fact they require further subvention. I am concerned clearly that the accounts showed a loss, and clearly that matter will have to be addressed with the directors, and we will have to understand whether or not that loss at the moment can be put forward in a suitable way, that it's built into the funding that the radio station has in fact got outlined for at present time for next year. But I will clarify when I bring the motion to this honourable court for the support or otherwise for public service broadcasting, how we are going to meet that deficit that Manx Radio have reported in their accounts. And I will understand that once I receive further information from the chairman of the board.
Member for Ayr and Michael, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the Minister agree with me that it's entirely appropriate for the board of directors of an organisation such as Radio Manx to actually be investing within appropriate parameters in order to take the offering forward, so that the organisation does remain relevant in the changing marketplace that it faces and changing public expectations?
Minister.
Well, I think the answer to that question in general terms is I think it is up to any organisation to make sure that it remains relevant in a fast-changing environment. I think, though, the slight difference with Manx Radio is that it, of course, receives a public subvention, a significant public subvention, which, of course, represents, of course, the partial cost of delivering these services. And, of course, the radio station, Manx Radio, does need to stay current in order to ensure that it can fund the rest of its services through the income that it receives from advertising and other income streams. So, yes, I agree, but I also agree fundamentally it is the right of Tynwald to ensure that in exchange for the public subvention, in exchange for delivering a public service broadcasting requirement, that it also receives proper value for money, and that is balanced in ensuring also that competing interests, competing businesses are also given a fair and level playing field within which to operate.
Final supplementary, Mrs. Caine.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank the Treasury Minister for his comprehensive reply and undertaking to further challenge the board of Manx Radio. But a couple of points. First of all, I don't want this to reflect on the output of Manx Radio, which I would like to say I think is a very high standard. I'm just on in terms of this expansion of the radio's output. Is the Minister concerned that, given it's a publicly financed public service broadcaster, that this could be seen as unfairly competing with other commercial providers on the island who have also invested in video technology?
Treasury Minister.
Well, I rather I accept partially the points that the honourable member makes, but I also rather compare that to BBC Radio competing on the same basis with local private radio or national privately run radio stations. I do think the question from the honourable member for Eyre and Michael probably more accurately reflected the position. I think the radio station itself will need to keep pace with modern technology in order to continue to attract advertisers. The basis, however, on which it does so, and whether there are any limiting factors that Tynwald wishes to place on the radio station in exchange for receiving public funds, will of course now need to be a matter of further debate, and I think it is appropriate that in the very near future Tynwald does have that opportunity to be able to express its views and decide whether or not, first of all, public subvention is appropriate, and on what basis that public subvention is received, and what the expectation is, therefore, from the radio station and its directors.